Undercover boss walks into his vet clinic, stops cold, hearing a nurse crying behind the kennels. What happens when a CEO walks into his own veterinary clinic and uncovers the real story behind the polished smiles? Thomas Grant, founder and CEO of GentleCare Animal Clinics, had built his reputation on one simple idea: compassion first, always. Over the years, his small network of 9 clinics had become beloved in their communities, trusted by pet owners who saw them as family. But recently, things felt different. Complaints had started trickling in, not about treatments, but about feeling pressured into expensive add-ons, about rushed, impersonal care. Meanwhile, turnover among long-term staff was quietly rising. His regional managers insisted everything was under control. Still, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was wrong. So one afternoon he made a decision. No corporate memo, no scheduled visit. Just a man, an old jacket, a baseball cap pulled low, and a rescue dog named Max trotting beside him. He chose Willow Creek, a small suburban location where most of the staff wouldn't recognize him, and stepped through the glass doors like any other client. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. The walls were lined with smiling photos of cats and dogs. Everything looked just right. But Thomas knew. Appearances could lie. He wasn't here for show. He was here to see and to listen. Thomas took a seat in the corner of the waiting room, Max curling up loyally at his feet. The clinic buzzed with low conversation and the occasional bark or whimper from behind the exam doors. Everything looked fine on the surface. The walls were clean, the magazines fresh. The smiling faces on the posters promised care and trust. But Thomas had been in business long enough to know it's never the paint on the walls that tells the real story. It's the people. A woman in a crisp but worn blue scrub top approached, moving a little slower than the pace demanded by the day. Her name tag read Jenna. Her silver hair was neatly pulled back, but the lines around her mouth and eyes spoke more of exhaustion than age. She knelt down slightly to greet Max first, offering a soft, "Hey, handsome," and a gentle scratch behind his ears before looking up at Thomas. "Welcome to GentleCare," she said, her smile genuine but tired. "How can we help today?" Thomas returned her smile, keeping his voice casual. "Just a checkup. He's a rescue. Had a rough couple of months. I just want to make sure he's okay." Jenna nodded warmly, scribbling a note on her clipboard. "We'll take good care of him, promise." As she led them toward an exam room, a sharp voice sliced through the hallway. "Jenna, you forgot to mention the Wellness Plus package." Standing at the front desk was Victor, wearing a pressed shirt and a headset he didn't really need in a room this small. His voice was loud enough that several clients turned their heads. Jenna flinched, the apology already rising to her lips. "I was going to mention it during the consult," she said, voice low. Victor shook his head, waving a laminated pamphlet in the air like a sword. "You know the protocol. Mention it up front. That's how we hit targets." Jenna nodded, murmured an apology, and ushered Thomas and Max quickly into an open exam room. As the door clicked shut behind them, Thomas caught the faintest hint of a sigh escaping her. She checked Max's vitals with the careful, practiced hands of someone who knew animals better than people. She talked to him the entire time, not loud or showy, just little reassurances under her breath. Thomas watched closely. These were the things you couldn't fake, the small touches, the way her hands instinctively cradled the back of Max's head when checking his ears. This was real care. But it was clear Jenna was carrying more than the weight of a day's work. While she examined Max, Victor popped his head into the room without knocking. "Don't forget to recommend the preventative dental package," he said, his voice tight with impatience. "End-of-quarter numbers aren't going to fix themselves." Jenna smiled tightly and nodded, but Thomas caught the quick clench of her jaw, the slight tremor in her hands when she returned to checking Max's teeth. After Victor left, Thomas leaned back slightly. "Busy day, huh?" Jenna offered a thin smile. "It's always busy lately," she said carefully. "Short-staffed, lots of new policies." Thomas didn't press. He just nodded, making a mental note. The checkup was routine. Max was healthy, just a little underweight and skittish, nothing unexpected for a rescue. As Jenna finished typing up the report, she hesitated, then slid the laminated pamphlet across the counter toward Thomas. "I'm supposed to recommend this," she said, almost apologetically. "It's extra wellness screenings, monthly dental cleanings, some supplements. It's a few $100s. Thomas glanced at the glossy print, the big gold stars promising the best for your pet. "Do you think he needs it?" he asked gently. Jenna hesitated. Not like someone trying to close a sale, but like someone fighting an invisible battle inside herself. Finally, she shook her head. "Honestly," she said, her voice just above a whisper, "Number Max needs good food, a safe place to heal, and regular checkups. Not a bunch of extras." Thomas folded the pamphlet and tucked it into his jacket pocket without a word. Jenna gave him a grateful, almost embarrassed smile and went to finalize the paperwork. Back in the waiting room, Thomas watched as Victor hovered over another client at the front desk, aggressively pushing the premium package, his smile tight and rehearsed. The young couple looked uncomfortable but nodded along anyway, swiping their credit card with a defeated sigh. Thomas caught Jenna's eye across the room. She was cleaning an exam table, her shoulders slumped in quiet defeat. No one noticed it, but he did. He sat there a few moments longer, Max's leash loose in his hand, feeling the wrongness settle deeper in his gut. This wasn't just a few bad sales tactics. This was a betrayal of everything he'd built. When Jenna brought over the printed bill, her hand brushed his for the briefest second. She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't even expecting anyone to notice. But Thomas saw it, the silent exhaustion of someone who kept doing the right thing, even when no one was watching, even when it cost them. As he signed the paper and tucked it into his pocket, Thomas made up his mind. Tomorrow, he wouldn't just watch anymore. Tomorrow, he'd start pulling the whole rotten root out of the ground, because good people like Jenna deserved better, and the animals deserved much, much better than this. The next morning, Thomas was back at Willow Creek Clinic before the front door was even unlocked. This time, he came alone. No Max, no distractions, just a worn notebook in his jacket and a gnawing sense of urgency in his chest. He waited across the street, leaning against a lamppost, watching. At 7:28 a.m., Jenna arrived. Same faded blue scrubs, same canvas tote bag with a stitched paw print that had seen better days. She moved more slowly than the day before. There was a stiffness to her steps, the kind that comes from working too hard, too long for too little. She unlocked the side door and disappeared inside. 10 minutes later, Victor pulled up, not a hair out of place, aviator sunglasses, despite the overcast sky. He walked in holding a paper coffee cup, one of those $8 kinds that came with oat milk and confidence. Thomas exhaled slowly and crossed the street. Inside, the clinic lights were flickering on, casting a soft yellow warmth across the reception desk. Jenna was behind it, wiping down the counter with a damp cloth. She looked up as Thomas stepped in, surprise flickering across her face. "Oh, morning," she said, her voice hoarse. "You're back?" "Just had some follow-up questions," Thomas replied with a small shrug. "And, honestly, I liked how you treated Max yesterday." She smiled at that, small but real. "He's a sweet dog." Before she could say more, Victor strode in from the back, already talking. "Jenna, I need you to reprint the invoice for the Sawyer appointment and this time include the dental supplement add-on. You forgot it again." Jenna's face fell. "I didn't forget. I spoke with them. Their dog has a tooth extraction scheduled with their primary vet already. I didn't think—" "You didn't think," Victor cut her off, voice sharp. "That's the problem." Thomas stood quietly by the counter, pretending to scroll through his phone. But his blood was starting to hum. He watched Jenna's fingers tighten slightly around the edge of the desk. Not enough for Victor to notice, but enough to say this isn't the first time. Victor lowered his voice, but not enough. "We've had this conversation. You're not here to make judgment calls. You're here to support sales. That's how we keep this place open." Jenna didn't respond. She simply nodded and turned toward the printer. Victor noticed Thomas, then gave him the briefest glance, and then the rehearsed smile. "Hey there, you need something?" "Just waiting on some notes," Thomas said easily. Victor nodded, already halfway through the door to the staff area, muttering something about projections and KPIs. Thomas followed Jenna with his eyes. She was standing at the printer, shoulders hunched, blinking faster than necessary. When she returned, she placed the paper gently on the counter. "Sorry about the wait," she said. "You okay?" Thomas asked quietly. She hesitated, a split second. Then she smiled again, that same tired smile. "I'm fine. Always am." He didn't push. Not yet. But he couldn't just walk away either. So he waited. Throughout the morning, Thomas lingered in the lobby, occasionally pretending to browse brochures. He watched Victor hover, interrupt, correct, and push. He watched as Jenna patiently explained to an elderly woman why her cat didn't need another full panel of blood work, and then watched again as Victor swooped in after, trying to upsell her anyway. But it was what Thomas overheard from the back room that made him stop pretending to observe and start paying attention. It was a few minutes after 11 when he walked past the staff hallway and heard Victor's voice, louder than it should have been. "You're too soft. That's the real issue." Then Jenna, her voice quieter, measured. "I'm not soft. I just won't lie to people." Victor scoffed. "You know what that makes you? Replaceable." Thomas felt the breath catch in his throat. For a moment he was frozen, not in fear but in anger, not explosive, not showy, just deep. He leaned slightly closer to the door. Jenna's voice came again, steadier this time. "I've given 30 years to this field. I've cleaned wounds, held shaking paws, and stayed late to comfort a dying animal when no one else wanted to. I'm not perfect, but I won't sell something a pet doesn't need." Victor didn't respond. Just the sound of a chair scraping back and the door creaking open. Thomas ducked out of view, walking briskly toward the waiting room. His heart thudded against his ribs. This place wasn't just off course. It was bleeding trust by the minute, and the people who still had their integrity, they were the ones getting pushed out. As Jenna returned to the front desk, she didn't see Thomas watching her from the reflection in the plexiglass divider. She straightened the stack of flyers again. She wiped the counter. She smiled at the next client walking in. But the crack in her armor was visible now, and Thomas knew exactly what he needed to do next. The storm broke at 2:17 p.m. The waiting room was half full, a mix of elderly clients with slow-moving dogs and a mother holding a tabby wrapped in a towel. Thomas sat quietly in the corner chair by the window watching. He was supposed to be just another guy in a jacket, invisible, but some moments refused to stay quiet. A man in his late 60s stepped up to the counter. His Labrador, Gus, panted at his feet. The man looked nervous, fumbling with his wallet. "Hi, I'm here for Gus's annual," he said. "We usually just do a basic checkup and heartworm, but I got this message that I needed to approve a Gold Wellness Plus package." Jenna looked up from the screen, lips pressed into a flat line. She started to speak, but Victor was already behind her. "Yep," Victor cut in, all smiles. "That package includes upgraded diagnostics, early disease screening, 3 optional injections for joint health, and a year's supply of premium flea meds. It's what we recommend for all our dogs over 7. The man hesitated. "That's almost $400. Victor's voice tightened, still smiling, but harder now. "Sir, it's what's best for your pet. Wouldn't you want to give Gus the best shot at staying healthy?" The man shifted on his feet. Yeah, but Gus has hip dysplasia. He's on prescription meds already. We just need... Victor cut him off. That's exactly why this plan is ideal. Jenna finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Actually, if I may, Gus doesn't need half of what's in that package. He's had consistent blood work, and the joint injections overlap with his current meds. I'd recommend the standard wellness plan. It's more affordable and suits him better. Victor whipped around, his smile gone. Jenna, he said under his breath, but loud enough that Thomas could hear. This is not your call. Jenna stood her ground. I'm not making a call. I'm telling the truth. Victor turned to the man. I'm sorry. She's a tech, not a vet. I'll make sure the doctor reviews the full plan with you. You'll see, this is the right choice. And then, as if rehearsed, Victor looked straight at Thomas and said, Sir, you've been sitting here for a while. Did you need help with something? Thomas stood. He stepped forward, calm, measured, but every step was heavy with intention. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He simply reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and flipped it open to reveal the small white card that had built this entire company. Thomas Grant, founder and chief executive officer, GentleCare Animal Clinics. A silence rippled through the room. The man with Gus froze. Jenna's breath caught. Even the cat on the towel gave a surprised meow. Victor blinked. I thought I recognized you, he said quickly, trying to recover. I didn't realize you were visiting today. Thomas didn't answer right away. He turned to the man with the dog. Go with the standard plan, he said. And today's visit is on the house. Thank you for trusting us, even when we didn't earn it. The man nodded slowly, gratitude mixing with confusion, and took Gus toward the exam rooms. Victor laughed nervously. Mr. Grant, Not here, Thomas said quietly, with the kind of finality that makes the air stop moving. Office, now. Victor hesitated. He looked around, as if hoping someone else might interrupt, offer cover, or change the subject. No one did. Jenna stood like a statue behind the counter, her eyes locked on the floor. Thomas walked toward the back. Victor followed. Inside the cramped office, Thomas closed the door gently. I'm only going to ask once, he said, his voice low. How long have you been upselling clients beyond what their animals actually need? Victor's smile wavered. Sir, it's not upselling. It's guidance. We frame premium care as... Stop, Thomas interrupted, soft but cutting. You were about to guilt a man into paying for treatments his dog doesn't need, and when your tech told the truth, you undermined her. Again. That's not framing. That's manipulation. Victor folded his arms. With respect, I've been hitting targets. This location's revenue is up 27% since I took over. And staff turnover? Thomas shot back. Client retention? Your numbers mean nothing if they're built on fear and burnout. Victor scoffed. This is the real world. People don't pay for honesty. They pay for peace of mind. I sell that. You don't sell peace, Thomas said. You sell doubt, and you do it at the expense of our mission, our values, and the people who still remember why we started this clinic in the first place. Victor said nothing. Thomas stared at him for a long moment, then took a breath. You're done here, he said, effective immediately. Victor's jaw clenched. You can't just, I can, I am, and that was that. Thomas opened the door and walked back out into the hallway, where the light now felt sharper, cleaner. Jenna was still standing behind the front desk. She looked up when he entered. Their eyes met, and for a second, neither of them said a word. Then Thomas nodded, his voice quieter now. You were right, he said. Every word. Jenna blinked, her shoulders sagged. Not in defeat, in relief. I'm sorry it took this long, Thomas added. Jenna didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just nodded once and said, It's okay. You're here now. And for the first time in days, Thomas believed that maybe, just maybe, things could be right again. The exam rooms fell quiet after Victor's departure. Not a celebration, not a cheer, just a heavy kind of silence, like when a storm finally passes and the ground is left soaked and battered. Thomas stayed at the counter, feeling the weight of the moment settle deep into his bones. He hadn't come here planning to upend lives. He hadn't come here seeking drama or confrontation. He'd come because somewhere along the line, he'd trusted the wrong people to guard the heart of what he built. And that mistake wasn't Victor's alone. It was his, too. Jenna stood across from him, slowly tidying up the desk, pretending not to notice the stares from a few clients still lingering by the door. Her hands shook slightly as she stacked the credit card machine, smoothed the brochures. Thomas watched her for a moment longer before stepping closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Got a minute?" She hesitated, then nodded. Thomas led her to a small consultation room off the main hallway, a cozy space meant for difficult conversations between vets and families. Today, it serves another kind of purpose. Jenna sat stiffly in the corner chair. She didn't fidget, didn't make excuses, didn't try to fill the air with nervous chatter. She simply folded her hands in her lap and waited, steady. Thomas leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. Jenna blinked. It was like she hadn't expected him to say it, or maybe she'd stopped expecting anything from people in charge a long time ago. "You don't have to," she said after a beat. "I do," Thomas insisted. "I built GentleCare to be different, a place where the animals came first, where staff were trusted, respected. I put that mission on every plaque, every poster." He let out a slow breath. "But somewhere along the way, I started believing the numbers more than the people." Jenna's gaze softened. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't need to. Thomas pushed off the wall and sank into the chair across from her, suddenly feeling every year of his 50 years settle across his shoulders. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Jenna nodded cautiously. "Why did you stay?" he asked. "Why not just leave when it got bad?" For the first time since he'd met her, Jenna smiled. Not the tight professional smile, but something smaller, sadder, and more honest. "Because the animals didn't do anything wrong," she said simply. "They still needed someone to fight for them." Thomas sat back, silent. The words hit harder than any corporate report ever could. "And the people too, sometimes," Jenna added after a moment. "Some clients, they come in scared. They need kindness just as much as their pets do." Thomas nodded slowly, feeling shame and respect wrap around his chest in equal measure. "I saw the way you handled Max," he said. "You didn't just check his vitals, you made him feel safe. That's the thing you can't fake." Jenna shrugged, almost embarrassed. "It's just what you're supposed to do, isn't it?" "Supposed to," Thomas repeated under his breath, like tasting the words for the first time. There was a long pause. Finally, Thomas leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low but certain. "I need your help." Jenna looked startled. "My help?" "I need to rebuild this place," Thomas said. "From the inside out. And not just this clinic, the others too. I thought hiring tough managers and focusing on sales would keep the doors open. Maybe it did for a while. But it's not enough." He locked eyes with her. "I need people who remember why we're really here. People who still believe that doing the right thing matters more than making a quick buck." Jenna swallowed hard. "I'm not management material," she said after a beat. "I'm not asking you to wear a suit," Thomas said with a small smile. "I'm asking you to be the heart of this place, to teach others what you know, to remind them what it looks like when compassion leads the way." Jenna's eyes shimmered, but she blinked quickly, pushing it down. "What would that even look like?" she asked, voice rough. Thomas sat back, imagining it. Not a glossy corporate clinic, but a place where tired people came to feel hope again, where scared animals felt safe, where trust wasn't a marketing slogan but something you earned. "It would look like you," he said quietly. Jenna laughed then, a short, surprised sound, and shook her head. "I don't know if I'm enough for all that." "You are," Thomas said without hesitation. "You already are." Another long silence, but this one felt lighter. Finally, Jenna nodded once, sharply. "Okay," she said. "I'll help, for the animals." Thomas smiled. "For the animals," he agreed. As they stood, Thomas reached for the door, but Jenna's voice stopped him. "Mr. Grant," she said softly. "Thank you." He turned back to her, meeting her steady gaze. "No," he said. "Thank you for staying, even when no one was watching." And for the first time in a long time, Thomas stepped back into the hallway, not as a CEO chasing metrics, but as a man trying to earn back the soul of something he loved. The next morning, Willow Creek Clinic opened its doors to a different kind of energy. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. It was quiet, like a house that had finally been aired out after a long, stifling winter. Thomas sat at the front counter, not behind some glass-walled office. No suit, no clipboard, just a plain blue polo shirt with the GentleCare logo embroidered over his heart. He didn't issue orders. He didn't give speeches. He just showed up. Jenna was already there, her movements smoother than yesterday, her smile realer, and something unspoken passed between them. Not gratitude, not awkwardness, just a shared understanding. Today had to be different, and it had to start small. The first thing Thomas did was gather the morning team. Jenna, two young techs named Melissa and Kai, and the front desk coordinator, Angela. They stood awkwardly in the tiny break room, clutching coffee cups like shields. Thomas didn't stand on ceremony. "I'm not here to micromanage," he said. "I'm here to listen." The group shifted, exchanging glances. He continued. "I want to make 3 things clear." He raised one finger. "First, there are no more sales targets, no quotas, no pressure to push services the animal doesn't need." A ripple of stunned silence. Second finger. "Second, you are expected to be honest with clients, even if that honesty costs us money in the short term." Jenna exhaled sharply, her shoulders finally dropping from around her ears. Third finger. "Third, if you're not sure about something, ask. If you see something wrong, say it. If someone tries to punish you for doing the right thing, you come to me." No one spoke for a long moment. Then Angela, who had spent the last year under Victor's rule, quietly said, "Will that really be safe? Speaking up?" Thomas nodded. "Not just safe, expected." Melissa looked like she might cry. Kai actually wiped at his eye with his sleeve. It was a start. Over the next few days, Thomas worked side by side with the staff. He cleaned exam tables. He stocked the vaccine fridge. He held leashes when nervous owners needed 2 free hands to fill out paperwork. And slowly, Willow Creek began to heal. The front desk stopped pushing premium care packages. Instead, they asked real questions. "How's Max doing at home? Any concerns you'd like the doctor to focus on today?" In the exam rooms, Jenna trained Melissa and Kai on how to read an animal's body language, how a twitch of the ear, a flick of the tail, told you more than any blood panel ever could. Clients noticed. One woman, bringing in a senior cat for arthritis care, blinked in surprise when Angela gently explained that her cat didn't need $300 worth of supplements, just a better heating pad and a little joint support. "I thought clinics always tried to upsell," the woman said, stunned. "Not anymore," Angela said simply. Word spread faster than Thomas anticipated. Within a week, client satisfaction surveys shot up. Tips for the techs increased. New clients, referrals, not marketing gimmicks, started booking appointments. But the most important change wasn't in numbers. It was in the faces, smiles that weren't forced. Laughter floated down the hallways without fear of being silenced. Trust, fragile but real, threading its way back into the walls. Midweek, Thomas sat in the break room after closing, flipping through a notebook. He wasn't alone. Jenna perched on the edge of a chair nearby, sipping tea. "You know," she said casually, "I used to dream about leaving." Thomas looked up. "Not because of the animals," she clarified quickly, "but because it felt like nobody cared about us anymore, about what we were trying to do." She stared into her cup for a long moment, then added softer, "Feels different now." Thomas closed the notebook. "I should have been here sooner," he said. "You're here now," Jenna replied. And maybe that was enough. Later that night, Thomas stood alone in the darkened lobby. The fish tank bubbled quietly against the far wall. A rack of leashes swayed gently in the air-conditioning breeze. He ran a hand over the front desk counter, feeling the cool smoothness of it. The same counter Jenna had wiped down with shaking hands just days ago. It struck him that leadership wasn't a title or a plaque. It was standing in the quiet after everyone else had gone home, making sure the next day would be better, even if no one else was there to see it. Thomas wasn't perfect. He wasn't trying to be. He was just trying to be better. For them, for the clients, for the animals who couldn't speak for themselves. And as he locked up the clinic for the night, he realized something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. He was proud. Not of numbers, not of expansion, but of people. Real people, doing honest work for the right reasons. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't quick. It was real. And for Thomas, that was more than enough. The email arrived just after sunrise. Thomas was sitting at his kitchen table, a mug of coffee steaming in front of him, flipping through the day's reports. Everything had been trending upward. Happier clients, stronger staff retention, better reviews. For once, it felt like things were moving in the right direction. Then Janet, his executive assistant, texted 3 words that froze him in place. "You need to see this." He opened the forwarded message. The subject line hit like a punch. "Urgent. Misconduct report. Willow Creek Clinic." Inside, the allegations were laid out neatly, almost professionally. Longtime technician Jenna L. has been independently adjusting medication recommendations without veterinary approval, putting patient safety at risk. See attached video evidence. There was a link. There were screenshots. There were comments from fake accounts stirring on social media. Whispers that GentleCare's sweet old vet tech had been playing doctor behind the scenes. Thomas stared at the screen for a long time, the coffee cooling untouched by his hand. The smart move, the corporate move, would be immediate suspension. Launch an internal investigation. Distances himself from Jenna. That was what the board would expect. Protect the brand. Contain the fallout, presume guilt until proven innocent. Thomas pushed back from the table, the chair scraping across the tile. He knew the procedure, he knew the pressure, he knew the cost of getting it wrong, and still, he hesitated. Because he'd seen Jenna. I saw her kneel to comfort a trembling rescue dog too scared to step through the exam room door. Seen her stayed late without clocking overtime just to call a nervous pet owner and talk them through aftercare instructions. People like Jenna didn't fake compassion. They didn't pretend to be honest. But in today's world, an accusation was enough to tear a life apart. No proof required. By mid-morning, the rumor had started to leak inside Willow Creek. Whispers, side glances. Melissa and Kai looked worried. Angela was clearly rattled. Clients, sensitive as animals to changes in energy, seemed more tense too. Thomas called Jenna into his office. She stepped in, calm, but there was a tiredness around her eyes he hadn't seen before. "I guess you've seen it," she said simply. Thomas nodded. He didn't sugarcoat it. Someone sent an anonymous tip accusing you of practicing without authorization. There's a video. Blurry, but..." He trailed off. Jenna stood there, hands folded carefully in front of her. "I didn't do it," she said. No defensiveness, no dramatics, just quiet certainty. Thomas studied her. "You're not suspended," he said firmly. "Not unless there's proof. Real proof." Jenna blinked, almost like she hadn't expected that answer. "I'll cooperate with whatever you need," she said. "Checks, interviews, anything." Thomas nodded again, but even as she left the room, he could feel the invisible crack running through the building. That was the thing about doubt. It didn't need permission to spread. That afternoon, Thomas pulled security footage. He combed through medical logs. He interviewed staff quietly, one by one. Everything Jenna touched was documented. Every medication she handed over was cross-checked by a vet's signature. Every interaction matched protocol to the letter. The so-called video evidence from the anonymous email, grainy, zoomed-in footage from a hallway camera showing Jenna talking to a client, but no audio, no context. Nothing showed wrongdoing, and yet still. Some clients canceled appointments. Some whispered, "Maybe where there's smoke, there's fire." Thomas could see it, feel it, the slow poison of suspicion. By closing time, Willow Creek felt heavier than it had in weeks. Jenna moved through the halls like a ghost, doing her job but staying out of sight. Melissa kept wringing her hands at the front desk. Kai muttered to himself as he stocked vaccines, jumping at every unexpected sound. Thomas stood in the doorway of his office watching it all. One email, one shadow, and all the rebuilding could come crashing down. He felt the weight of every decision pressing against his chest. Because here was the truth he hadn't wanted to admit. He could fire a bad manager. He could fix broken systems. But he couldn't fix the part of human nature that loved to tear good people down, even without proof. Not unless he fought for it. And tomorrow he decided he would. He would fight. For Jenna. For the soul of Willow Creek. For the idea that truth still mattered, even in a world that sometimes didn't seem to want it. Thomas locked the front doors that night with a heaviness in his chest he hadn't felt since the day he first opened the clinic. But even as he stepped out into the cool evening air, he promised himself one thing. He would not let the people who whispered from the shadows define the story here. Not this time. Not ever again. The next day started the way most battles do. Quietly. Thomas arrived early, parking at the far end of the lot to clear his head before stepping inside. The accusations against Jenna still hung in the air, invisible but oppressive. He saw it on the faces of every tech, every receptionist. Saw it in the way Jenna moved through the halls, a little smaller than usual. No one said anything. But silence can be louder than shouting. Thomas knew he was running out of time. Either he proved Jenna's innocence, or the slow bleeding of trust would finish what Victor had started. He wasn't sure what he expected. A breakthrough, maybe. A confession. Some piece of evidence no one had noticed. What he didn't expect was a phone call. Janet patched it through with a single sentence. "It's about Jenna." Thomas picked up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was hesitant, young and achingly familiar. "Mr. Grant? It's Lila Sanchez." Thomas's mind snapped to the file, former assistant tech at Willow Creek. Quiet, bright, resigned 6 months ago under personal reasons. "I heard about..." "What's happening?" Lila said. "About Jenna." Thomas's stomach twisted. "You have information?" he asked carefully. There was a long pause. "I do," Lila said finally. "And I should have said something sooner." Thomas leaned forward, heart pounding. "Talk to me." Lila took a breath. Then the words spilled out, halting, rushed, heavy with guilt. "Victor," she said. "It was him. Before I left, he tried to get me to make fake records. Notes that said Jenna had overridden vet instructions, changed doses. I refused. He threatened to make things hard for me if I didn't cooperate. Thomas closed his eyes, the pieces clicking painfully into place. And the video? He asked. I recognize it, Lila said. It's from a hallway cam, but it's edited, cropped to make it look like Jenna was doing something wrong when she was just reassuring a nervous owner. I saw the real footage before I quit. Do you have proof? Thomas asked, trying not to let hope creep into his voice. Another pause. I kept the original security downloads, Lila whispered. I didn't know if I should, but I couldn't just erase everything. Send it to me, Thomas said. Right now. Minutes later, a file landed in his inbox. Thomas opened it with shaking hands. There was Jenna, clear as day, speaking softly to a tearful woman holding a shaking terrier. Jenna's hands never touched any medication, any records. She simply crouched beside them, offering comfort, patience, and calm. Nothing even close to malpractice, nothing close to wrongdoing, only kindness, the very thing that made Jenna who she was. Thomas let out a slow, shaking breath. He had what he needed, and it was time to set things right. By noon, he had called an all-staff meeting. No one knew why. Whispers buzzed like static around the lobby. Thomas stood in front of them, heart pounding but face steady. Jenna sat near the back, hands folded tightly in her lap. Melissa and Kai stood beside her, fidgeting. Angela hovered by the door, nervous. Thomas waited until the room settled, then spoke. I want to talk about truth, he said simply. Heads tilted, eyes narrowed. A few days ago, Thomas continued, an anonymous complaint accused a member of our team of misconduct. The tension was immediate. Jenna bowed her head slightly, bracing herself. And most of us, myself included, felt that familiar flicker of doubt. Thomas's voice didn't rise, didn't harden. He kept it quiet, real. Because that's what doubt does, he said. It whispers. It corrodes. It turns loyalty into suspicion. He held up a flash drive. But the truth is not decided by whispers. It's decided by facts. And today, we have them. He clicked a small remote. The screen behind him lit up, not with accusations, but with the real footage. The room watched in stunned silence as Jenna's gentle interaction played out. No wrongdoing, no rule breaking, just care. Human, imperfect, but good. When the video ended, Thomas turned back to his staff. The anonymous tip was a lie, he said bluntly, fabricated by someone we already removed from this organization. Shock rippled through the room. Victor? Angela breathed. Thomas nodded. And worse, he tried to weaponize our own fears against us. Tried to tear down one of the best people this clinic, this company, has ever had. He let the words hang in the air, heavy. I won't allow that, Thomas said, voice low but fierce. Not here, not ever. He turned to Jenna. And to you, he said, his voice catching slightly. I'm sorry, for the doubt, for the delay. You deserved better from all of us. Jenna blinked rapidly but didn't speak. She didn't need to, because sometimes redemption doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes from being seen, being heard, being believed. Thomas faced the team again. If anyone has a problem with leading with integrity, he said quietly, this is your chance to leave. If you're staying, you're committing to something better. No one moved. One by one, the staff looked at Jenna, and one by one, heads nodded. Slowly, resolutely. Thomas let out the breath he'd been holding. Today, they had chosen right, and tomorrow, they would be stronger for it. In a world that often feels loud and rushed, sometimes the quietest people are the ones making the biggest difference. People like Jenna, who didn't chase recognition, who didn't raise her voice. She just kept showing up, day after day, patient, steady, true. And leaders like Thomas, who forgot, then remembered, that real leadership isn't about power or profit. It's about protecting the ones who protect what matters, not with grand speeches, but with action, with courage, with heart. Remember this: doing the right thing is never wasted, even if no one claps for you right away. Sometimes just staying true to yourself is the bravest thing you can do. And when you see someone standing alone for what's right, stand with them, because that's how change really happens, one honest heart at a time. If this story touched you, if you believe that honesty, courage, and quiet goodness still deserve a place in this world, subscribe to the channel. Here we tell the stories that others overlook, the stories that remind us integrity matters, kindness matters, and standing up, even quietly, still changes everything. Subscribe, join us, stay inspired.